our third day of the winter school, and it is going to be pretty international today, and we are happy to have our first speaker with us, Dr. Kamil Zajączkowski from the Warsaw University, director of the Europe Center, and the topic we are going to discuss today with our participants and with you, Kamil, concern the European Union on the global arena as a global actor and challenges it has, because Ukraine is on a bumpy road to the membership. But also the future of the European Union is interesting for us, how the European Union sees itself in the future, what it is like now to be in political terms. This is a huge debate. It is my honor and pleasure to have you here. I'm really happy you agreed to talk to our audience. So the floor is yours. We proceed in the following way, that maybe you will talk around 30 minutes, and then we will open the floor for questions from our audience, and then we will end up the session. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, it's okay. Everything is now good. Okay, welcome all of you. Just a second, I need. Okay. Oh, okay. Welcome all of you. My name is Kamil Zajączkowski, like Oksana Krajewska mentioned. I am professor at the University of Warsaw, and I am director of the Center for Europe at the University of Warsaw. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here and to give lectures, of course, small lecture about the EU as a global player and EU as a player in international arena, especially in the context of the war in Ukraine. So my presentation is divided on 15 slides. So like Oksana mentioned, I try to give some short introduction about what's happened in international relations, in IR, and of course what's happened and what kind of consequences we can indicate for the European Union. And the last part is what kind of consequences is for you, for Ukraine people and for Ukraine state in the context of the war and what's going on. So maybe we start. So Oksana, if you put my presentation.
It will take a couple of minutes until it'll shared, because digital tools are very good, but they do not respond in the very first minute. It takes a little bit.
Because I sent to Oksana Krajewska my presentation.
Yes, and Oksana.
Sent to you.
Oksana is going to open it.
Yeah. I'm trying to do this. Yes. Just trying to figure out everything. Sorry for this once again. But I cannot see. Where is it?
Share the screen. There is a button, share the screen.
No, it's not. Because I cannot see presentation.
But I sent to you by email. To your email.
That is the problem, that we didn't.
So I sent to you by email. I can send it once again.
You can post it also in the chat, and I will try to open from the chat.
Or if it's more convenient for you, you can share or not. You can share your presentation from your computer, from your gadget.
Okay, I will try.
Okay, I will. Yes, it's once again, as I told, my technical problems, and here I have presentation.
Just send it to me very briefly, Oksana.
Yes, Oksana, if you send it to Oksana.
Yes, send it to me, вибрехли Оксана.
It's the same with, I cannot open it once again. Oksana, maybe I will resend it to you. Maybe it will be faster.
Yes, in a minute, and we will start. with the presentation.
Okay, because I can do it without. Okay, maybe I will start.
And I will, as
please?
soon as I get it, I will share the screen and we will follow.
Yes, is everything is okay? Now
You
you can
shared?
see.
Yes, we
shared
can
already.
see your presentation, everything, almost everything is okay, not
Okay.
entirely. You can
Yes,
just
okay.
switch for the full screen if you wouldn't mind.
Full screen.
Focus slide off. Focus slide off.
The upper line, показ слайдов, нажęcia główne, wstawianie, projekt, animacja, показ слайдов.
Focus slide off.
I don't have. I think we must do it in this way.
But we see your tool line.
Oh my God.
Or you press F5.
So maybe Oksana Hołowko, if you put my presentation, it will be much easier for me.
Yes, I will do that. You start with that one and I will just share then once I receive from Oksana. Let's move on.
Okay, because now it's
Okay, we can see not with the full screen because we see your presentation and it's better for you to manage by yourselves, I think. Do not send it to anybody.
Sana, you should have it. Okay.
But if you would like to see it for full screen, we are just trying to explain you that you have the top line of your tool in Microsoft
Yes, but
Word.
I have only show presentation and nothing more.
No. We have Надежда Главне, вставляние, проект, анимация, показ слайдов, рецензия, видок.
I don't have this.
Przepraszam. Sorry for my pronunciation.
I don't have this.
Yes, but you have. We see.
No, nothing.
Оксана Анатоліївна, технічні проблеми.
Yes, because I use
Оксана, ти маєш презентацію, подивися.
Google Meet.
Ні, немає додатка. Лист від тебе прийшов, а додатка нема.
Боже, ну я кажу, ну що це робиться?
Вкладення немає. Попробуй по месенджеру поставити.
Мені не відкриває, не пересилає.
We see your, dear Camille, we see your PowerPoint. In your PowerPoint, we see your PowerPoint tools. And hopefully, yes, at the moment,
tools,
it's a Glovna.
I have...
and you cannot press?
I cannot press.
Probably you are trying to do it in Google.
Yes.
It's the same mistake as Oksana Krajewska did a few days ago. It's conflict between two online systems, platforms.
Але ти вже маєш. Подивися, чи ти маєш зараз.
The solution is to download to your computer if it's possible.
Yes, I download from my computer and I can...
But not from Google.
Okay, narzędzia, okay.
Показ слайдов, показ слайд.
But I have...
Narzędzie główne, wstawianie.
Yes, but I have on the... Okay, yes, pokaz slajdów, okay. Because I have something, now I see, yes.
So you try with that?
Od początku.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Або от початку.
Yes.
От початку, так.
Okay, so do you see everything? It's okay?
I have the presentation. I can share the screen.
Please do this because I don't even have access. I am not have access to share.
Just a moment.
Okay, because I share also my presentation.
Тепер треба комусь закрити.
Okay, I close my presentation.
Мене не пускає шерити.
Okay, because sorry for 5 minutes this interrupt, but I think that in 1 minute you can start.
Yeah. Sorry also from my side, because I don't know. I was trying to do the best, but still it's not.
So I am sharing, just a moment. Can you see the presentation?
Yes. Perfecto.
Okay, let us start.
But I cannot see my students.
We're here, don't worry.
Okay.
Once you
So,
talk, you will see them. So that's it. My screen is shared. You will just have to sign me on the next slide, please.
okay. So, dear students, dear colleagues, and dear professor, it's a great, once again, it's a great pleasure for me to see all of you. Unfortunately, by internet, but I hope that once upon day we can meet face to face. Okay, like I said, my presentation and short intervention, it will be about the EU as a global player, and also I explain what's happened in global order and what kind of consequences it is for the EU and also for the Ukraine. So the slide number 1. The structure of international relations is definitely changed. If we look what's happened in the last 25, 35 years between 1990 and 2024, we can see a huge differences, and also we can put thesis that the structure of IR is changed. At the beginning of the 90s, following the end of the Cold War, following the end of the Cold War, we had a liberal order, and the international relations was dominated by the West, United States, European Union, and of course states like Japan or South Korea. So at the beginning we had domination of United States and the West. At the beginning of 21st century, at the beginning of 2001, 2002, we had something new. What does it mean? The IR is changed, and later we have a crisis, economic crisis, military crisis. It means the war in Ukraine in 2014, and everything. It means now, in my opinion, we have crisis of multilateral institutions. What's more, we can see since 2010, 2011, more and more assertive policy of China and Russia in international order. And Oksana, please, next slides. Like I said at the beginning, and I divide my presentation on I divide my presentation on some important, in my opinion, important data. So at the beginning, we have 1991, 1993, unipolar moment. What does it mean? It means the United States was number one. The United States was the king in international relations. And if you look at the war in Iraq in 1991, or if you look at the Balkans War in 1991, 1995, only United States had enough power to solve all the problems. Since 1993, 1994, until 2018, we can indicate multipolar world with the domination of United States and the European Union. What does it mean? So, United States and the West was still number one, but between 1993, 1994, 2018, we also had a new emerging markets like China, India, Asia, Southeast Asia, some African states or Latin American states. So between 1993, 1994 until 2018, we had multipolar world with domination of United States, EU, and China and Southeast China. All this subject, all these states and in EU cooperate each other. Maybe they didn't like too much, but they cooperate all together. So, in the meantime, I'd like to put emphasis on two very important data. The first is 2008, we had economic crisis. But, and maybe Oksana, you switch off the presentation at the moment because I'd like to see my students. Yeah, if you, yes. And okay, 2008, what's happened in 2008? It was economic global crisis or not global crisis? What's happened in 2008?
Global crisis, economical global crisis, and changing of economic models. Brush up.
Yes, perfect. And what kind of consequences for the West? What this crisis, what kind of consequences for the position and the domination of the West in global market?
Basically, it ended, and this specific crisis, that was the specific crisis, because it was actually the most hit countries. These were actually Western liberal democracies.
Yes, yes. My colleagues are very good, Professor Nesterova and Professor Hołowko, a very good answer. So 2008, it was, of course, global financial economic crisis, but it means the crisis was hit much more in the West, not in the emerging markets. So after 2008, emerging markets went up, and the West domination is down. So we have, since 2008, it is point number one, we had more powerful emerging markets, or we can now say global South. What does it mean, global South? Latin America, Asia, and Africa. So since 2008, we still have multipolar world, but the world, like Professor Nesterova mentioned, was much more balanced. The emerging markets went up and global south was much more bigger in the context of financial issue. Okay. 2000, so the position of the West is down, is in economic dimension is down. What happened in 2014? It is the next data. What's happened in 2014?
Revolution of dignity in Ukraine.
Yes. Dear students, please answer. We can discuss. So it was, of course, the beginning of the war in Ukraine. What kind of consequences was for the EU and for the EU and for the global order?
May I try to ask?
Yes,
to
yes.
answer? I think it was related to sanctions on Russia because EU established some of them, so and then got implications. That's it. Thanks.
Yes. So the EU starts to very slowly to think about a new kind of policy towards Putin and towards Russia and something more. So thanks a lot, Marina. And what's more? For the EU and for global order, it means the military factor, unfortunately for the European Union, come back to the global order. So military factor was came back to the global international relations. It is not good news for the EU because the EU is not military power. So 2014 means the military factor came back to our diplomacy, came back to our foreign policy. Because until 2014, nobody believed in military factor. Everybody was focused on economic and political factors. Unfortunately, 2014 means the military factor is still very important tools in IR. And please, Oksana, show my presentation.
We have also a comment inside from speakers.
Yes.
Do you mean that after crisis in Syria, EU has been involved in migration crisis, but that was not a question of military impact.
Yes.
Military involvement. And exactly after 14, after discussion about North Atlantic participation of Ukraine, it's closer in the military way.
Yes, exactly. So 2014, it means the military factor, like you mentioned, Professor, that EU and not only EU, but we start to think in the context of military factor and hard power in IR. And next slides, Oksana. And later we have two more data, 2016, Brexit, Mr. Trump, it means America first, and COVID-19. What does it mean for IR? It means globalization. My colleagues said deglobalization, but I prefer to use the word globalization. It means, okay, we have a global integration, but it's much more slower and slower. Because I don't like to use the word deglobalization, because I think we are too much, too bigger, and Europe cooperate with China, with Asia, with different parts of the world, so it's difficult to cut and to say, okay, we don't have globalization. It's very difficult to do it in 1 second. So we have globalization since 2016, since Mr. Trump was a president, and of course COVID-19. So the globalization, it means slower and slower cooperation in the world. Just a moment. Ola, zadzwonię za pół godziny. No pa. Okay, sorry. And what does it mean? The bilateral relations come back, and we come back to power politics. So competition between great powers. So the period 2016-2022, it is not good time for the European Union. It is a time of power politics. It is a time of competition between great powers, and it's a time of globalization. And the last slide, the last point in this slide, the war in Ukraine. And it means not only, and later I will explain. I explain my colleagues in Global South. The war in Ukraine, it is not the war, a local war. It is not a regional war. It is the war about global domination. In my opinion, it is the war between the West and between the East, between the United States and European Union domination or China-Russia domination. It is not alternative. It is now, since 2022, the global order is divided on two parts, the West and the East. What do you think about this thesis? And Oksana, if you switch off this, my presentation. So what do you think about this thesis? The war in Ukraine, in the context of global relations, in the context of IR, it means the war between the West and the East. What do you think about this thesis?
I support, but not probably. I'd like to notice that you mentioned swing countries, South and deep South Africa, which is not still involved, India, which is balancing, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia. I don't know how to spell it correctly,
Yes.
but they are also just hanging on and balancing. But probably the main I agree. I said that we have the Third World War, really, not Ukrainian war, not Ukrainian Russian, Third World War.
Yes, and of course, my colleagues must understand this, because a lot of my colleagues from the Global South said, okay, it is only regional war. Okay, so like you said, the global order is changed. And now the point number 2, and Oksana, please put in my presentation, everything what I said had and have, unfortunately, negative consequences for the EU. Why? Because the EU, and the next slide, and everything what's happened now in the last 10 years have and had negative consequences for the European Union. The EU is a child of multilateralism and neoliberalism. It is not a good time for multilateralism. It's not a good time for neoliberalism. Point number 2, the EU is a soft power, civilian power, and EU is not hard power like China, like United States, or like Russia. Point number 3, the EU is not good. The EU is not good like at geopolitics. The EU is good in dialogue, in diplomacy, but not in geopolitical competition. And the last point, the EU business model, like with Russia, okay, we do it business, and the business is everything is okay, and policy go on. No, it's not enough, and the war in Ukraine shows this. So, next slide, Oksana. So all this issue have negative consequences for the European Union. And what's more, also, unfortunately, we have a lot of global challenges, but also we have a lot of internal challenges. Like Professor mentioned, we had a migration crisis, we had a Brexit crisis, we had an economic crisis, we had a social crisis. Now we have problems with a common agriculture policy. So we didn't, and still we don't solve our internal challenges and problems. So it is a huge problem because we have, in one side, we have a global challenges, in another side, we have internal challenges. And for example, Mr. Borrell said, we must use the language of power. Or Ursula von der Leyen said a few years ago in 2020, the EU should be a geopolitical player. But what does it mean, geopolitical player, in the context of European Commission? Who could be a geopolitical player? Who could be? What do you think? European Commission? No, states. States, they have enough power to be a geopolitical player. And next slide, Oksana, please. And what is the important? And it is next, my thesis. Poland joined to European Union in 2004. So in May, we celebrate 20 years. The European Union was set up in 1992. So the European Union today, it is not the same European Union that we have joined in 2004. And also, the global order is completely different. And also, it is not the same Europe like in 1992 and 1993. So that's why I start at the beginning of my lecture from what's happened in global order. In 1992, the West, we can see the West domination. In 1992, in 90s, the West and neoliberal power was number one. The global South and Russia was weak. So today, we have completely different situation. And next slide. And of course, in today, our position is not clear because we have United States and China. And I put the sentence, Mr. Ivan Krastev, it is one of the famous philosopher and academic, who said that our position in the future could be like Japan during the Cold War. During the Cold War, we had United States and China. No place for another player. And I am afraid that today we have China and United States. Sorry, during the Cold War, we have China and United States and Soviet Union. Now we have China and United States. And the question is about what kind of a position for the European Union. And next slide. And of course, the EU prepares something like a global strategy of foreign and security policy. It was set up in 2016, and we don't have enough time, but please compare. The EU prepared two kinds of papers. In 2003, EU issued European Global Strategy. And in 2016, once again, the European Union issued Global Strategy. But please look at the introduction. In 2003, introduction was, everything is okay, the global order is peaceful, we are more and more powerful institution. In 2016, the introduction to global strategy was completely different. And the EU, in the introduction in 2016, underlined, the global world is dangerous. We have a lot of crises, and our position is not very good. So it is a huge differences between global strategy in 2003 and 2016. So it is very important because since 2016, and Professor Nesterova mentioned about migration crisis, we know our politics, because we are academics, so we know much more early, but our politicians know since 2016 and definitely since 2022 that the global order is changed and the EU must be changed. And for example, yesterday the EU gave you a financial support, but also I explained in Polish TV yesterday and today that this money is not only coming for military equipment, but coming for economic stabilization, coming for investment, coming for business, because you must stay and you must live like in normal states. You must have more investment, you must have more money, your economy must go on and go on. So my thesis is the EU leaders very slowly, but since 2016, but definitely since 2022, they know one thing. The global order is changed. Now we have divided liberal global order or China, Russia global order. No alternatives. And once again, please much more, next slides. And of course, the problem, if we talk about the European Union, we don't have CCDP, it means Common Security and Defense Policy. And of course, officially, we have Common Security Defense Policy since 1999. Before, we have Common Foreign and Security Policy since 1992. Okay, we have Common Foreign Policy, Common Security Policy. But to be honest, it doesn't mean, and it is next my thesis, the Common Security Defense Policy and Common Foreign Security Policy, it doesn't mean that the European Union have military power. No, we don't have military power like China, like Russia, like United States. Of course, like I put on my presentation, we send military operation. We send a small civilian operation, but it doesn't mean that we have military power. And next slide. And once more, next slide. Okay, so until today, we don't have military power. We have something like external relations, external policy of the European Union. And we have a huge disproportion, a huge dichotomy between our economic position and our foreign and diplomatic position. So we are quite strong in the economic dimension, but if you look at foreign policy, we are quite weak. What's more, if you look at external economic relations, who is number one? European Commission. If you look at foreign policy, who is number one? Yesterday, you can see member states. And to be honest, I don't believe that we can solve this problem. Some of my colleagues said, okay, maybe majority votings in foreign policy, it will be a good idea. To be honest, I am not keen on this idea. But it is my opinion, because I think if we do it, majority voting in foreign policy, we'll have more and more crises and more unfriendly situation between member states. So next slide. So we can see, and you can see, we don't have one common EU policy. If you look at Iraq, if you look at Kosovo, for example, Kosovo, how many states from the European Union recognize Kosovo, and how many states from the European Union doesn't recognize Kosovo like independent states?
Well, there is a division.
Yes,
I don't
how
remember,
many?
but it's a great question.
Yes. How many states doesn't recognize Kosovo from the European Union? We have 27 member states. How many member states doesn't recognize Kosovo like independent state?
Six.
5. So now we have, so we don't have one common EU foreign policy. So if you look at Iraq, Russia, Kosovo, like I said, the common security defense policy, please remember, it's not military power. It doesn't mean that the EU is not a military power. And I mentioned about European security strategy 2003 and 2016, but it is not like defense strategy. We don't have defense strategy. Poland, Germany, separate member states, they have, but we, like European Union, we don't have defense policy. And if you compare, we spend altogether nearly 300 billion United States dollars. And if you look at United States, they spend over 700 billion United dollars for military issue. And the question is, who is the leader in the European Union? Mr. Macron? I don't know. I don't believe. Mr. Scholz? I don't think. So we don't have leadership in the European Union. And two last slides, Oksana. So, to be honest, and the war in Ukraine show us, the United States and the European Union must cooperate. I don't believe in independent security power of European Union. okay, my colleague said what's happened when Mr. Trump will be #1 and will be elected for the president. I don't know, but I believe that in the United States, we have also Capitol, we have also congressmen, and we have also army. And everybody knows we need to cooperate with United States, and United States must cooperate with the European Union to keep a global order in a liberal way. And I think the war in Ukraine shows one thing. The European Union must be prepared better in the defense security policy. We must set up more military issue. We must set up military equipment, but it doesn't mean to build independent and not connected with the United States structure. We must cooperate with the United States. And last slide, 5 minutes, the war in Ukraine. Definitely. Dear students, dear professor, dear colleagues, the war in Ukraine is not local war, like I said at the beginning of my lecture. It's a turning point in the history of European Union and also in the European global security issue. And definitely, the war in Ukraine means undermine the entire geopolitical order. And now it's very important for you, for me, for my colleagues in Poland to show our colleagues in Global South, in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. The war in Ukraine, it's not like the war in the Middle East. I don't like to compare, but the war in the Middle East is totally different issue. The war in Ukraine is a global war. It is a proxy war, but it's a global war about the domination. And now we must to explain our colleagues in Africa, in Latin America, that if you not support us, and if you support China or Putin, okay, you can support them. But please come to Beijing, please come to Moscow, but not coming to Washington, to New York, to Paris, to Italy. Who is the winner? Unfortunately, nobody is the winner. Ukraine is not the winner of the war, and Putin is not loser. And I think, and I hope that we change our policy, because until 2022, our policy towards Ukraine was too naive. We don't understand what does it mean no imperialism in Putin way. The no imperialism is a very important part of the Russia foreign policy. Okay, Putin is dead in 5-10 years, maybe in 1 year. But after Putin, I'm sure we'll have a new Putin. So that's why it's very important for EU and the global West to understand that we must learn to discuss with Russia, with Putin or without Putin. But it's very dangerous for the European Union. Thanks a lot, my students, and you can switch off my presentation.
You've made my day. And I saw your articles about ethics. I subscribe your point of view for 1000%. Really, thanks a lot.
Thanks a
dear
lot, Professor. I just put Professor, thanks a lot. And now the time for discussion.
For very good questions, because really, Kamil, thank you very much for the insights from Poland, because Poland has always been really an advocate of Ukrainian interests, having voice for us, even if Ukrainians were not listened to. Poland had a voice, and that voice was heard. And that's really essential in international politics and international relations, to have such kind of cooperation with the countries, with the closest countries, which can support each other in hard times. As to comment, I think your lecture just reminded me about my students' times when we were listening to the lectures of Professor Pietras. He was explaining how the international relations and political order will be developing after the collapse of the bipolar order. Well, listening to that lectures in 1993, 1994, that was for me a far away time, and I was not sure whether I will be witnessing the collapse of the bipolarity.
Yes.
It's currently in that model, we experience a collapse of the bipolarity, and the huge discussion is which consequences all those relations will have. And again, the turning point is that we switch again from the rules-based political relations to the power-based political relations. And that means a lot in terms of shaping instruments to deal in the new political reality. As I can observe the war in Ukraine and the situation, how it is develops, it did not achieve the very first goal which the European democracies have, to return back to the rule-based order. This is far from that point.
Exactly.
And that's endangering for the global paradigm pretty much. And that means also the question for us and for the EU, because you rightfully mentioned in 1992 when Poland joined to the EU, it was about economics. Nowadays, it is about security.
Security, yes. Yes, Oksana, if I may, for example, now I had a lot of discussion about further enlargement, and also I will send to you, Oksana, my two book, which where I was editor about cooperation with Balkans, and you can send it to your colleagues, to Professor Nesterova, and also to students. And a lot of people ask me about enlargement. And like Oksana Hołowko said, when Poland joined to the EU, enlargement means hope. It means hope for business, hope for economic relations, hope for good business for everybody. Now enlargement means the fear, afraid of Russia, afraid of China, afraid about the war. So it's totally different attitude. It is one issue, and I'm very skeptic, because some people said, okay, we must change the Lisbon Treaty and later enlargement. No way. If we want, we should enlargement do it now. Don't wait for Lisbon Treaty and change the Lisbon Treaty. We can put enlargement now, and later we can discuss about the changes of Lisbon Treaty. In my opinion, and in opinion of a lot of my colleagues who are lawyers, we don't need to change nothing. Lisbon Treaty is enough to put enlargement, but like said Oksana Hołowko, now enlargement means the fear of Putin, afraid of Putin, afraid of China, Xi Jinping, and it's totally different attitude.
Thank you very much.
May I also, dear Kamil, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, yes, and your thoughts and being with us today. It's our honor to have you here. And also,
Yes.
I would like also to listen and maybe to ask, how do you evaluate the influence of new elections in the European Union and also in the United States towards this political order, and how it could be changed and influenced for Ukraine?
I don't know. We must wait, but I think we don't have. I cannot observe a lot of changes during the election in the European Parliament. Probably the three main parties in the European Parliament probably will gain a similar position like today. And probably they will create it and set up a new European Commission. And of course, if you ask me about a new Polish government, definitely I hope that it could be a new part of our relations between Poland and Ukraine, because we can cooperate. Definitely, we support you, but also we must explain our people, our citizens in Poland and you in Ukraine, that also in the future, also we can compete, because we have a similar economy, and competition is something normal if you said about European common markets. So I'm quite optimistic.
Thank you very much, Kamil, really for explanations, because there are a lot of questions running out on the road.
So please select, and maybe you choose some data and we can meet once again, but it depends on Oksana Hołowko and Oksana Krajewska. So all the best for you and best regards, and Professor Nesterova will be in touch, I hope.
Kamil,
Yes,
you're
if you
invited.
wouldn't mind, we'll be in touch, because a lot of questions.
Please send me email, so it will be.
Yes, I will write you immediately.
And say,
it was
I
a
say
great
hello
pleasure,
to
a great honor.
and I
Thanks.
say hello to Professor Łazowski, and I know that now he is a lecturer. So later, maybe also I will be in touch with Professor Łazowski, because we can cooperate also in Center for Europe, University of Warsaw. Now but I will be in touch with Professor later with you.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, dear Adam. I am really glad to see you here and to have you here with us. It is a really great pleasure for me to introduce you to our audience. And with Kamil Zajączkowski, Professor Zajączkowski, we almost exhausted our time on having a break. But I suggest us to move on the agenda and to speak, to have you on our list and to discuss a little bit about the economic explications and also labor market issue, employment issues, employment policies, how it is going to change. Adam has unique expertise in helping candidate countries to adjust to the European Union requirements, and that's is really one of the best experts I personally know. So that is true. So Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Oksana, for this kind introduction. I'm always happy to be involved in anything involving Lviv University, which has become my third home, as some of you may know, thanks to Oksana and Professor Mihailo Minkiewicz. So today I'm talking about free movement of persons and social mobility. I do not have a PowerPoint, but I have a very clear structure which I want to start with. And I think the title of my talk will be A Bumpy Journey into Unknown. Because if we look back at the way mobility issues have evolved in the European Union, we do see that we have two tensions. On the one hand, we have the drive to facilitate free movement of persons, and initially free movement of workers, but then free movement of persons. But on the other hand, we have some kind of reluctance or trepidation even among the member states in certain areas. And that usually comes to the surface around the time of enlargements. So I think it's a good thing to mention, bearing in mind that screening with Ukraine is about to start in 2 weeks. And then the negotiations, hopefully, the other side of the summer. And this issue will definitely be on the table, at least for Chapter 2, free movement of workers, but possibly also Chapter 3, right of establishment and free movement of services. So the way I structured this talk today is I will, first of all, step back, because we need to understand how free movement has evolved over the years from the early days of what was then the European Economic Community and what we have now. So how we got to the point where we are, where we have EU citizenship, which is no longer a political concept only, as it had been designed by the drafters of the Treaty of Maastricht, but actually it has quite important legal connotations, which the Court of Justice has been exploring for the last 30-odd years. And then once I do this introductory part, I will move to part 2, where I will focus on 4 areas, just to show you the kind of discussions we are having in the European Union right now. First of all, I will go deeper into EU citizenship, just to show you that it is a half-baked concept. And there are issues which make perfect sense and are very plausible, but we also have issues which make very little sense at all, and where the Court of Justice has a role to play. So first will be citizenship. Then I will look into the relationship between consecutive enlargements of the European communities and then the European Union and free movement, and how migrations after enlargements have shaped the legislation that we have now, how they shaped the case law, and what may happen in the future as we head for the next enlargement. Then I will look at the social impact of free movement on things that we often forget about. When we talk about social impact, we usually look at the host countries, how the fabric of society changes, and how mass migration into especially the old member states, how they impact the functioning of those countries and their economies. But very little time is spent discussing what happens to the home countries, especially if you have countries joining the EU which are much poorer than the old member states, and therefore people leave in big numbers. And then you end up with cases like, for instance, Bulgaria, which has gone through a massive brain drain over the last 20 years, where population dwindled considerably. And what then? So that's the negative side of free movement, if you like. And then finally, I will get to the point where I discuss very legal stuff, where we have ongoing discussions in the European Union, where we do see obstacles to mobility. Things like recognition of qualifications, and also access to benefits, access to social assistance, and so on and so forth. So that's the plan for the next half an hour. And then, of course, hopefully we will have the time for a discussion. So how did this bumpy journey into unknown start? Well, of course, it started in the 1950s, when the EEC Treaty, well, it was back then, entered into force. And what we need to remember is that, first of all, the treaty provided a skeleton framework only, basically saying we have free movement of workers, discrimination is prohibited, and access to posts which are involved, which are related to the state itself, is prohibited. I mean, it can be lifted, but it's generally prohibited access to public service. And then what happened is that, first of all, especially the Council of the European Economic Community started to adopt, in a very incremental fashion, secondary legislation, bit by bit. So separate legal act on the rights of workers, non-discrimination related legal act, separate act on restrictions to free movement. The treaty only said you can restrict on grounds of public policy, public security, public health. How, when, under what circumstances, that was unclear. And so on and so forth. And that evolved incrementally. The end result was that we ended up with 12 legal acts, which were difficult to navigate. Now, in the meantime, the Court of Justice proceeded with its case law. It started to get references for preliminary ruling from national courts. It started to get actions for infringement coming from the European Commission. And it became very clear that just like in other areas of what was then EEC law, the Court of Justice will not be shy and will take decisions which will be long-term considered to be controversial, very far-reaching. So, for instance, the court ruled early on that those key provisions on free movement, which we have in what is now the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union, TFEU for short, and they will be directly effective. That individuals can invoke them in national courts to enforce their rights. And bonus, they can do that in actions against member states, but also in actions against other individuals. Second of all, the Court of Justice also ruled that the exception which we have in Article 45 of employment in public service has to be interpreted very narrowly, which took many member states by surprise. They thought anyone who is potentially on the payroll of the state has to be the citizen of the home country. Thank you very much. No free movement here. The Court of Justice disagreed. The Court of Justice ruled that if you're a train conductor serving coffee or tea and selling tickets, you're not exactly exercising official authority, even though you're employed by the state. So the court started to interpret that exception very narrowly. It would apply only to the likes of James Bond, Secret Service, when you actually exercise official authority. But regardless of all that, until early 1990s, the free movement was actually quite limited. The free movement rights under EU law were only available to those who were economically active. So to workers and to self-employed. And of course, you had also free movement of services, which is temporary, which is yet another freedom of internal market. So all of this was related to economic activity, and no wonder what is now the EU, what was back then called European Economic Community. And then, of course, we started to move forward. European Economic Community became European Community. And in 1990, a big breakthrough came. Council adopted 3 directives on free movement. 3 directives going well beyond what was envisaged thus far. So we got a directive on students, a directive on the rights of pensioners, and the so-called Playboy Directive, the rights of those who are rich, simply have money, have health insurance, and are not burdened to the social system of the host country. So interestingly, this started to develop, and the free movement started to expand at the EU law level to non-economic migrants, but it started to extend through secondary law. So there was no initially anything in the founding treaties that would indicate that direction of travel. So the big breakthrough in terms of primary law came with the Treaty on European Union, the Treaty of Maastricht, where, as an attempt to bring the EU closer to its citizens, the member states decided that we will have something called citizenship of the European Union. But to make it clear, in Amsterdam a few years later, it was added, just to make it crystal clear, that EU citizenship does not replace nationality of the member states. It's something extra. It's a cherry on the cake, if you like. And the condition to have EU citizenship is nationality of a member state. So as long as you have nationality of a member state of the European Union, you are an EU citizen, whether you like it or not. This happens automatically. And there was a big discussion, of course, about it. It was a highly symbolic move. For some, it was looking like we are heading towards European Federation. So there was this meta issue on the top of this, European Union, EU citizenship. What happens next? And then when you tried to get into that bubble, it was clear that the citizenship was not actually adding much apart from symbolism. Apart from what Sir Francis Jacobs, British Advocate General, said in one of his famous opinions, that I'm a European citizen. Because the catalogue of rights that were linked to citizenship only was very limited. The most important right, obviously, the right to move and reside freely, with the caveat subject to details laid down in secondary legislation. So that not changing much, bearing in mind how developed the secondary legislation became in the meantime. Then we had two non-judicial remedies, right to complain to the EU Ombudsman, but very limited, only to maladministration in case of EU institutions, right to petition the European Parliament. You have two types of electoral rights that apply to those EU citizens who have migrated. So they can vote in the local elections and stand in local elections in the country where they reside. And the same goes for the elections to European Parliament. You also have, and that right is very useful in practice, sadly, a right to consular protection in a country outside of the EU where your country does not have a representation. That's particularly appealing to small member states, which do not have consulates all around the world. So then EU citizens can go and ask for help, for consular help, to any EU member state, embassy, or consular division. And they will get emergency travel document, funding, help, whatever consular authorities provide. So that catalogue, as you see, is fairly symbolic. And the question was whether citizenship would evolve from that window, shop window decoration to something actually meaningful. And it has thanks to the jurisprudence of the Court of Justice, which pays a lot of attention to EU citizenship, which declared Article 21, the key free movement provision there, to be directly effective, alongside Articles 45 and 49 on workers and self-employed, respectively. And also, thanks to case law on something that is very puzzling, very problematic. And that's where you see that citizenship still is a half-baked concept. Before I get there, let me just add one final point to this historical overview. All these legal acts that I mentioned, the secondary legislation that evolved incrementally, has found one home, and that's Directive 2004/38. That's the so-called Citizenship Directive, which has been in force for almost 20 years. It's going to be 20 years in late April this year. And it's been in force in terms of the implementation for 18 years. So again, we have a lot of jurisprudence of the Court of Justice, and that's something that Ukraine will have to deal with also as part of preparation for accession. Ukraine will have to transpose that directive to Ukrainian law. So that brings the first part of my talk to the end. This is, you can see now how everything has evolved over the years, how we moved from purely economic movement to general movement rights in the EU. So let's start then with the next part of my presentation. The citizenship, which I've already mentioned, explained what it is. Why is it a half-baked concept? Because when it comes to movement, it's a tricky one. if you look at the jurisprudence of the court and the legislation, especially Article 3.1 of the Citizenship Directive, you will see that goods, products, have more rights in the European Union than people. And that's something wrong. What do I mean by this? For free movement rights to be triggered, you actually need to move. You physically need to move. Then you feel that you are an EU citizen because you are using your free movement rights. But what about invoking your citizenship of the EU in your home country? And let me give you this example. This is a case called Zambrano, which is a judgment more than a decade old, which is known for all good and all bad reasons. But it's a very good example to illustrate that problem that I'm trying to highlight. So in Zambrano, you had 2 children of parents of Colombian nationality. Now, so 2 Colombians residing in Belgium. They arrived as refugees, as political refugees, and everything was fine as long as Mr. Zambrano was paying taxes. And then when he became involuntarily unemployed and needed help, the Belgian authorities suddenly stopped liking Mr. Zambrano and realized that his status, his immigration status, was not fully settled. So they wanted to deport him. What's the problem? Well, the 2 children were not Colombian citizens. They were Belgian citizens. So you had EU citizens in their own country, 2 children that were at risk of being deported because parents had an unclear immigration status, parents who were third country nationals. And the paradox here is that they could not invoke the directive because it only applies when you move borders. You have to physically move. As Advocate General Sharpston, the British Advocate General in that case, in her opinion said, it would have been enough if they regularly hopped on Eurostar and went from Brussels to Paris to Disneyland. Then they would have fallen under free movement of services as recipients of services, and that would have triggered free movement rights. But she, in her opinion, Sharpston that is, said, well, there's something completely wrong here, because you can activate free movement of goods provisions without physically exporting goods. You can sue the state if you find national rules which are in breach of free movement of goods, hypothetically, potentially making your economic activity more difficult. That you can do. With free movement, you need to move. Now, if you expect a comprehensive answer from the Court of Justice in this question, then you are in for a huge disappointment. It's one of the most appalling judgments of the court ever, not in terms of the conclusion, but in terms of the reasoning, because there is none. This was a Grand Chamber case. The judges simply couldn't agree on the text. There's no dissenting opinions at the court, so they had to negotiate whatever, and they came up with literally a handful of sections of that judgment, despite really having a lot of good material in the opinion of Sharpston. And the court basically ruled that the directive didn't apply, and Article 20, which creates citizenship, precluded deportation here, because that would deprive the children of the genuine enjoyment of their rights. But as always with such decisions of the court, there's a lot of follow-up cases, because then national judges struggle applying this in their real cases, in their real-life cases. And this line of jurisprudence is extremely muddy, and it's very difficult to navigate. But the bottom line is that you still, if you're an EU citizen, if you, in your own country, it's quite difficult to invoke free movement rights to, for instance, protect your family members, or to give movement rights to your family members, especially if they are third country nationals. So we are far from what the Advocate General Sharpston had suggested, that Article 21 of the treaty should be read as the right to move and or to reside as two rights, not one right where two parts make the full package. So these discussions are ongoing with every single judgment of the court. Everyone gets more excited and more confused at the same time because it all doesn't add up together. But it shows that it's a half-baked concept in lots of ways, especially in that context of migration, free movement. And that takes me to the next point, which I promised to look into. The impact of on mobility and free movement, the impact of consecutive enlargements. Now, very often when you talk to lawyers, to academics, to practitioners, they link big migrations in the European Union to 2004 enlargement, the Big Bang enlargement. And one of such migrating workers is your humble servant, as you probably have guessed from my family name. But this issue actually had started way before the Big Bang enlargement. This discussion started already in the late 70s, when Greece was negotiating its terms of accession, followed by Portugal and Spain. And the transition periods that the 2004 accession treaty had, and then the same 2007 and 2013 treaty for Croatia, those transition periods are basically based on the deals that Greece had, that Portugal and Spain had. And those were long transition periods, 7 years. But the way those transition periods have always been designed is as follows. First of all, it leaves the member states, the old member states, the freedom not to introduce transition periods after all. They have the right to lift the restrictions straight away. This is what happened in 2004. 3 countries of 15 lifted the restrictions very quickly, or straight away, rather. UK, Ireland, they believed it was a good proposition and a fair decision, and Sweden by accident, because the parliament was too late adopting a law giving effect to the transition period, and then they opened the labour market. Thought, okay, whatever. So the point I'm trying to make is that the model of transition periods is well established, and it goes way beyond 2004 enlargement. And this is hardly surprising, because if we look at the history of enlargements, except for 1995 enlargement, we always had countries much poorer joining the European Economic Community, well then the European Union. And that obviously triggered that fear that people will move in big numbers simply in search for better life. Whether they would move temporarily or permanently, well, life has its own rules that you can't predict anything. Some people living for a short period of time actually staying, some moving and then going back. And that, of course, triggered lots of things. First of all, changes to the social fabric of the society, of the host country. That was seen very much indeed in the United Kingdom, where at some point, the second most often spoken language in this country was Polish. That's no longer the case, but that was in the 2000s, late 2000s. Second, that triggered accusations of social dumping, because people coming from the new member states, as they were considered and labeled back then, of course, didn't have much expectations in terms of the salaries and remuneration for their work, simply because the GDP in their countries was much lower than in the old member states. So they would often bite their lips, stay in appalling accommodation just to save money, and then potentially make transfers to the home country. The other thing, of course, is the social dumping accusation goes well beyond just movement of workers. We need to remember that, of course, the economies of the member states have changed over the years. And what 30, 40 years ago was all up to the workers being formally hired by their employers now is very often done by people who are self-employed. And here you did see huge migrations after 2004, after 2007 enlargement, for a simple reason. There were no transition periods except for those applicable in Germany and Austria to some clearly specified types of manual, mainly construction-related jobs. So a lot of self-employed people arrived straight away after the consecutive enlargements because transition periods do not apply to them. That, of course, also translated into issues with free movement of services, cross-border services, in particular, posting of workers. Here we had those two huge cases that reached the Court of Justice, one on the right of establishment, one on free movement of services, respectively, Viking and Laval. And that in 2005-06, this was a huge discussion in the European Union because you had a lot of companies coming from countries like Latvia, Estonia, which were very modern, way ahead of their Western counterparts in terms of technology they were using, in terms of skills of their staff. And they were winning contracts one after another in the old member states. And of course, they were charging lower fees because there was lower GDP where they were based. And that led to accusations of social dumping, huge problems with trade unions. And these two judgments, Laval and Viking, are very, very good examples. Now, where does this leave us in terms of the future enlargements? Well, I think I'm not as optimistic as the previous speaker was. And also, I'm not convinced 100% with absolutely due respect that we don't need a treaty change. I think we do need. The question is if we can do it through the accession treaty, or do we actually need to have a formal revision treaty? That's a different thing. But this is something that we need to think about, because I strongly believe that if we're going to have the enlargement, it will have to be a big bang enlargement. So it will be 2004 revisited for Ukraine and for at least a group of Western Balkan countries, of course, Moldova, we should not forget about Moldova, and Georgia. And that also means potentially big migrations. We won't have big migrations from some of the Balkan countries, because if you look at their size, apart from Serbia, well, I don't think all Montenegrins will move on day one, and there's only 500,000 people in the country. But of course, there's a question of Ukraine, and there's a very tricky issue, what to do with those Ukrainians who are legally now in the European Union, working, of course, under completely different rules. And this will have to be part of the accession negotiations, how that status will have to be adjusted following the accession. The question will be what the member states will want, whether they will extend some of the transition periods also to the right of establishment, so for those who are self-employed, for reasons which I explained earlier. But expect big discussions in the European Union about it. And unfortunately, in such issues, the negotiations with the EU are along the lines take it or leave it. There isn't much we can negotiate here. It's the EU that dictates the conditions. But again, as I mentioned, especially for workers, the transition periods are an option given to the member states. So the member states may provide more generous system, may open up their labor markets. It's just an insurance policy, if you like. So even if we have something in the accession treaty eventually, it doesn't mean that it will be all applied by all member states at that point. And that takes me to the next point, which is the social impact of migrations. And here, of course, I'm not a specialist in the area, I'm just a lawyer. But what we do see is that those migrations between the member states have had considerable impact on the host countries. I would say very positive ones, and also enriching for the local communities, especially if people integrate well into the host country society. But also, the social impact is felt very much indeed in the home countries, where they no longer reside. And that is at many levels. In smaller member states, that means often that young generations leave. And then they build their families and their homes elsewhere, not necessarily willing to come back. That, of course, creates a huge problem for the authorities of those countries, because that's a question of brain drain. That's also a problem that those who stay behind are usually elderly, and they need financial assistance of the state. They need pensions, medical care, and so on and so forth. The only member state that escaped this pattern was the United Kingdom, because most of those British people who used their free movement rights were actually the elderly. They were the ones who decided to retire in Spain or Portugal, Canary Islands, wherever it was warmer and not as rainy as here. But other than that, it's the young generations that leave. That's one problem. There's another problem when they bounce back. Very often they live in another country to make a living, to save money, and then they go back. And then very often, unfortunately, drama starts, because then they find out that they don't belong anywhere, that they no longer belong to the country where they never belonged to the country where they resided. They no longer belong to the country where they were born, because simply the country has moved forward, has moved on. People have changed, needs have changed. And then there's this bouncing back and forth, back and forth, which is not extremely healthy for many. And the final point, as we are getting short of time, the legal issues that arise in the European Union. So what we see, for instance, reaching the Court of Justice, what kind of discussions we have about the future of free movement. And there are two main issues here. One is the ongoing problem, and here we have many obstacles, to recognition of professional qualifications. We've gone a long way from the early 1989 directive on recognition of some professional qualifications. We have a horizontal directive from 2005, which is now perfectly fortified with case law of the Court of Justice. Very casuistic case law as well. Again, difficult to navigate. But we do see that recognition of qualifications has always been an obstacle for migration, because we have so many different systems in the member states. This is one of the areas which is not really properly harmonized. It's not EU's competence. And in some countries, we have a tendency to over-regulate, so too many regulated professions. In some countries, it's the exact opposite. And there are issues with recognition, as the case law proves, and reports of the Commission. And the second issue, which is access to benefits, and that takes me also back to the enlargements point. Unfortunately, good news has the worst shipping method. It's usually the bad news that is everywhere. And for many years, for instance, in this country, this being the United Kingdom, EU migrating workers were portrayed especially in tabloid media, as benefit dodgers. No one paid attention to people like your humble servant, who've been paying taxes from day one in this country. And this was never backed up by any data. So there was never any statistical data available who has access to benefits, who actually gets the benefits. And that unfortunately fed very well into Brexit campaign. And of course, the rest is history. But the thing is that, of course, each and every country has a different benefit system. And sometimes these systems are very generous because the national law says so, not the EU law. And then, of course, governments very often blame the EU for everything, which again feeds the sentiment. But what we do see is that the case law of the court has become clearer now. If you want to have access to benefits because your life has taken an unexpected turn, you're jobless and you need state assistance, well, that's all very fine if you first contribute to the system. And this is very clear from a case called Dano, where we had a citizen of one of the recent entrants who came with, I believe, 2 children, unknown fathers. She moved to Germany, and straight from the train station, or where that was an airport, she went to unemployment office and argued she deserved to have unemployment benefit. And she made it absolutely clear to the German authorities that she had no desire to work. Whether that was sensible or not, I leave it for later if we want to have a discussion about it. But the Court of Justice, because it all ends up at the court, made it very clear that this kite would never fly. This is not how the system works, that you can just move from one country to another and claim benefits. You need to contribute to the system first. But despite this, it is an issue. It is coming back to the surface every now and then. And it's picked by the media, and then it's like foam in the bath. It just grows, and grows. So the journey, as you do see, has been bumpy. We've made a huge progress. There's no question about it. From the early days, when it was all about movement of people who were economically active, to actually general free movement. But it's not 100% free, of course. There are possible restrictions to free movement, especially for people who reside up to 5 years. They need to meet certain conditions. They can't just rely on social benefits, and so on and so forth. Are there any current plans to revise the legislation? Well, not to my knowledge. No one wants to touch it. It's simply too sensitive, too politically sensitive to be touched. So a lot depends also on the case of the Court of Justice. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Dear Adam, thank you very much, especially for touching that sensitive issue, because during this school we actually did not talk a lot about the EU citizenship, and this is certainly the model which will have huge implications. And certainly for Ukraine, it is an area where we do not have a clue how it works. Unfortunately, we are used to deal with national citizenships. But the EU citizenship as a model is a very specific one. And indeed, it is a model which is linked with the benefits which are provided not by the domestic systems usually, but actually with the European Union standards which evolved and which grant access to those domestic systems. And therefore, I think this is the debate we will have to follow, and we will have to think about. And in the case of Ukraine, when we are going to join to the European Union, the impact of Ukraine on Ukraine will be tremendous. It is tremendous. The war impacts it hugely. And this, as we hear from the discussions, the status of Ukrainian IDPs living in the EU now is on the debate, now is on the table. The very first question, which was touched by the president, well, tax issues. Yeah, we want to tax all those who are in the EU, regardless of the point that a lot of people are living from the social benefits and they are not taxable in basic terms, usually, by any kind of the domestic legislation. So again, the questions are difficult and far from solution. And the status of the labor force and recognition of professional recognition. This is a point, I think, where we have a tremendous success, because indeed, before the war, it was almost impossible to recognize your professional diplomas as Ukrainian in the European Union. And here we have a huge step ahead, because suddenly it worked and it works when you dig into the issues in more details. And that is a point which is indeed a benefit which has to be kept on, because certainly in the negotiation discussions, when we will be talking again about step-by-step access of the labor force from Ukraine to the EU market, which is labor market, which is definitely more more interesting than the Ukrainian one. And then we will face those issues again, because there are complicated points. And again, coordination of the social security systems. Ukraine is totally out of the European communication with regard to the coordination of social security system. Some steps we do have, some on the bilateral level, on the interstate level. But again, this whole bunch of social problems is not properly negotiated on both sides. And I think it has to be a topic, because indeed, in my understanding, the European integration is about people, and that's it. So maybe we have questions. I don't see the chat.
Only thanks.
If I may add on the point of taxation, Oksana.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting issue, because taxation as such, I mean, a personal income tax or corporate income tax, direct taxation, that's not competence of the European Union. That's a national competence. And that's where, especially for corporate income tax, you have a lot of tax competition between the member states, on the one hand. And when it comes to personal income tax, you have a lot of litigation. Because although it is a domestic competence, it has to be exercised in accordance with principles of internal market. So we had quite a number of cases, for instance, in Germany or involving Germany, where at some point dividends were taxed at much more favorable rate if you were receiving them from German companies, which of course was stopping people from investing in companies abroad, which was in flagrant breach of free movement of capital. Then you have another example, which what you mentioned about Ukraine reminded me of what Poland did after the enlargement in 2004, that all people who left Poland, who had any links with Poland, had to file annual tax return, which is insane, because that obligation in normal countries only applies to those who reside for at least half a year. Then you have your tax domicile in the host country. So they forced Poles to file tax returns. And that, of course, triggered a lot of brouhaha, because that triggered bilateral treaties on avoidance of double taxation, which de facto lead to double taxation. Let me give you an example. If you were, well, it's my example, basically. When I moved to the Netherlands in 2003, and then 2004 enlargement happened, the tax rate that applied to me in the Netherlands was 10%. The normal tax rate was 20 or something around that, but the tax authorities in the Netherlands gave a discount to academics, which was very kind of them. So ultimately, my employer in the Netherlands was deducting 10% of tax. Because I had to file my tax return in Poland, well, a law-abiding citizen, I did, because I had links with the country, I had a flat. And that meant that I had to pay 30% tax in Poland, because an average salary in the Netherlands was very high salary in Poland. So I fell in the highest brackets of the tax. And that effectively forced people like me and many others to cut all the ties with the home country, because that doesn't make sense at all. You would be paying taxes at both ends, and that was contrary to free movement. And eventually the government gave up on this, but it's too late. Polish law actually is still not compatible with free movement. If you are, for instance, receiving royalties in Poland, and you are based in Poland, you're taxed in 10%. If you receive royalties in Poland, but you're domiciled elsewhere, you pay 20% of taxes, which is against free movement of workers.
Yeah, that's another part of the complicated issues which will be discussed actually, and but comparing social issues and tax issues, which both are the domain of national states of member states. The tax issues and the cooperation here is technically actually better structured than in the terms of the cooperation in social matters. And that is here heavily the point to make, because these will be internal discussions in Ukraine, how to keep the social system going on and membership rules to apply. So this is indeed a huge discussion. And of course, well, a really bumpy road to go still. and not a very simple one. So thank you very much, Juan, again for the presentation and drawing attention to the phenomenon of the EU citizenship. It is really indeed an important feature for the social security systems in the EU member states and in the EU social policy. So thank you very much. I will just call our participants. If they have any questions, we do use a Jamboard. And I did not remind our participants about that. But if you have any questions which you did not manage to ask to our speakers, please put them on the Jamboard, and we will use our cooperation just to let you know them and find some answers if they are. So don't hesitate. We have a screen break right now. And so I hope we will have our next speaker with us, Diana Spulber from the University of Genoa, and we will talk about the social innovations, because that's also a very important topic in many terms, in many regards. Maria?
I'm here. So we can have a short rest, I think, according to our schedule, 9 minutes. So.
And we will rejoin then over here. Adam, thank you personally. Thank you very much one more time again, and see you.
See you soon. Thank
See
you.
you soon. До побачення. Again, Diana, are you here with us?
Yes, I am here. Okay.
So nice to hear you. We wait for Maria. Maria?
I'm here. And Diana, I wrote to her today.
Yes, Diana is online. So we can start again and switch to our last session for today, which is about social innovations in the EU experiences. And that's, again, a special topic we are going to address, and in terms of the EU social policy as well. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you as our next speaker, Professor Diana Spulber, who will speak about social engagement and social innovations, which are, again, the part of EU social policies, policy in a broader term, and make the European Union life in social terms really important for every person which is on the territory of the EU. Diana is professor at the University of Genoa and is a coordinator of the UNICOM project, which is one of the structural projects our country has during the last years. And the main aim of the UNICOM project is to work with to research and to analyze the university's third mission, and especially the cooperation between the universities and communities. And really, the communities and the universities are both important players on that, involved to the social innovations as such. And Diana, the floor is yours. So we can see the screen. Yes. Please raise your hand and then unmute yourself, and then we will hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, that works perfectly.
Okay, so my presentation will be, today we will speak about social engagement and social innovation. When we speak about the social engagement, it's really important to think about the things that we are to do when we want to engage someone. Because when we speak about the social, the engagement at all, it means that when we want to engage, do you see my presentation well, or I shall...
It is not a full screen, so you just have to share it as a full screen presentation.
Okay.
It is maybe presentazione, and then to
Yeah,
start.
I know. But they just told me that it says. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
To engage someone, it means to employ someone. So it doesn't mean that I want to speak, because every time today, when we speak about, if you goes to Google and they start to say, okay, what is this social engagement? You will see a lot of information about social engagement and how it use it, or how we can use it on networks, social networks, on also online networks, and so on. But when we speak about social engagement, it means that we should to engage someone. It means that we should to provoke new and prolonged interest and participation. So we should educate people to participate and to be active on that. But it's not enough, because when we speak about participation, we should speak also about the responsibility. If I want to say something, to be active in some activities, I should be honest with myself and understand that my action will have a feedback and can return to me as a boomerang. So that is important. So it's to engage, is to be involved and interact with people, events, and expectation. Because if I am Diana Spulber, a professor here, if I do my presentations, your expectations are on this field. If I am Diana Spulber that goes to the university, there I meet other expectations, and I should be aware and honest with me if I can respect these expectations from others. Today we can meet a lot of people that speaks about everything. So we can see, no, it's a field of democracy when each one can express their opinion. But when I see someone or the opinion of someone, I should think, who is this person? I know it's not very popular idea, let's say, about, but if the biggest psychologists tell things about the psychology and about the human behavior, then I say, okay, this person has the knowledge about. Do you remember during it's what the quite emphasized as example, it's COVID period. In this period, every people could tell about every people who has had a medical degree, no? Each one could explain why the COVID and how we can deal with this infection, no? So a lot of information and the fake informations. So the responsibility, it's also personal when we see it or we promote some ideas of other peoples that probably are not linked or do not have the knowledge on this field. So that is my idea, because when we speak about critical thinking, so firstly, we should check the source from where is coming the information. If not, then everyone, everyone can be a bioengineer, can be a medical, everyone can be a policeman, everyone can be a teacher. So that is. Social engagement is also a socially responsive approach to communication practice that focus on collective level and effective co-creation of meaning. What does mean? It means also how we do, let's say to me, how we engage and how we approach the communication. I can tell the things by aggressive way and could not be understood by others, but I can do, or I can speak and tell the same idea by a positive way, by a non-violence way. And today we really miss this non-violence way of communication. Because if we check that today social networks, they are full of hate. And this demonstrates to us that our society is really stressed today. And it happens, let's say, to me, a lot of things that we say, how? It's quite impossible. I could not imagine that this can happen and that this fact can happen here. Social engagement refers also to the level of involvement and interaction with others in social activities and relationship. Here is how we do construct the relationship, how we do work on these constructions. And when we speak about the schools, European Union, that's how to say to me, when we speak about European Union and the social engagement that we have on this field, I want to say that if we check the level of happiness of the people, there is we can find a lot of maps of level of happiness around the world. So European Union, it's the one that have the highest level of happiness. What does mean? That the social policy for the persons, the social policies works in European Union. Even like the professor that has had the speech before me, we are different. Even in European Union, each country has his own system. And for example, we can ask till now to Spain how they did and how they solved the questions about social policy regarding the British old people that came to Spain in the summer period and they used the hospitals and so on of the Spain. No? So that is because if we check also the social institutions and how they are organized, even in the European Union, it's a national level, so each country has his own policy on that. And in Great Britain, in that period, or in United Kingdom, it is for paying. In Spain, Italy, Germany, French, something in French, it's for free. So if I am a European citizen, then I can move to countries where this is free. But if you are foreign citizen then, or even European but not Italian, so that you should have insurance. You not pay directly to the hospitals, but the Italy, for example, can ask the money, in this case, from Great Britain, but it took a lot of time. So let's say that Spain has had his own problem because of that. Social engagement is a business model, and that is also really important because users here are contacted by economy to perform tasks and in exchange for a reward. What does means? That means that also in let's say we need every time to go to perform our tasks. We are every time, like, let's say to me, challenging with something new. We are every time going, like, every time on competition. And this can be so stressful. We have a lot in Italy, for example, a lot of business model where the social engagement works, where the management of these enterprises are really, let's say to me, human, has a human approach. Olivetti, for example, it's one of the biggest company in Italy, and they care about their workers. They assure, let's say, a healthy workplace environment. Because if you go to the World Health Organization, no, you can check that 70, let's say, percentage of disease are connected with work, so with workplace. We have another, for example, model of enterprise like Ferrero that they use to be friendly with their workers. So it's another, so as the boss of Ferrero told one time in an interview, small interview, he never gives an interview, the happiness of, I will cite him, the happiness of my staff, it's really important for me, because if my staff are happy, then the production will be biggest. But here we can speak about a lot of theoretical, a lot of social theories on business and how important is the engagement on workplaces and so on. I will not trouble you, annoy you with these theories. What is European missions and citizen engagement activities in this field? So, we have climate mission, and here when we speak about climate mission, it's important to know that in agenda of European Commission is to be, let's say to me, at the greenest part of the world by 2050. Okay, so that it's important. The climate pact, that is, means that each country should contribute to that. Obviously, we have cancer mission, so it's a questions about how to prevent this illness around the European Commission countries. And this is paid by the all exams, all projects on this. For example, in Italy, we have a lot of preventive controls and so on. So, and today, if you speak with the medical staff, they will tell to you that it's the most important for them, and it's the only one that's really work in European Union, because each country should do that, should prevent and should do prevention controls, and it's for free. So to explain to you how to work, for example, I am starting to be a old woman, so each year I receive a letter with that I am invited to do a to control myself, and it's quite, how to say to you, in a month I can do that, and I do that for free, okay? And when I go to hospital, they explain to me that it's for free, it's a prevention, so do not feel stressed, nothing happens, so and so on. So, and please believe me, for other medical controls in Italy, we have to wait for a long time, but for this prevention, cancer prevention, it's a red line, so it's I can reserve this control in quite, if not less than in a month. So that it's also important. Ocean missions. The ocean mission started to be really important from the beginning of 19, because we checked that the water pollution, it's also important, and keep the water clean. It's important also for all the world, because we are interconnected, and we have had periods of a lot of high percentage of health disease in the European Union, but I think also in other countries, connected with polluted water and polluted sea, polluted oceans, and obviously polluted fishes. No? So mercurio or others, let's say, hard metals that has been found. So now, and I will now I pass a little bit that, and I will return back to all of this point. So now the European Commissions control the ports, the seaports, control the all, let's say to me, all enterprises that are working on this field to be sustainable and to be green. Cities missions, it's nothing other that the government should be near the persons. So it means that the city should be organized. Also, the architecture of the city should be inclusive and sustainable. So now all cities should, they just did, okay? But if someone we should not have, let's say, physical barriers. All the museums, all the important places should be how to say, reachable by all the people. Okay, it's another point. And soil missions, obviously, we work on the soil, we work with the soil, we eat a lot of things from the soil, so we should respect the soil how it is. No? So that is also a pollution of soils is prohibited in European Union. So if I turn back to these missions of European Union that is connected with citizen engagement activities, let's say that by each point, European Commission has also a financing. Not only financing gave to the country for to do that, but also the project, research project, educational project, and so on. For example, at University of Genova, for forming future teachers, we have courses, pedagogy of sustainability. We have courses for ecological pedagogy, so you can see how to educate to ecology, how to educate to be to the sustainability. So it's an important step, because also we can hear a lot of words, a lot of the phrases, pronounced phrases, a lot of how to say, informations, but if nothing is done, then it will remain on the paper. But today we do. So that's today, for example, we have some rules on fishing, and all countries should respect these rules. We have rules on how to organize the city, how to assure the accessibility, how to assure the logistics, the transport, and so on. And it is, once again, because it's not, do not think about the European Union that it's okay, she gives. No. It doesn't work like this. If the country member of a European Union do not respect some of law, European law, or so on, so the penalty arrives. Okay? For example, Hungary and Poland has been penalized by European Union for not closing, correct me if I am wrong, for not closing the carbon miner. And it was quite 1 million euro of penalizations. So you can see also Italy has been penalized because of soil pollution and so on. So it is. So you can see how all the things, it means, okay, climate mission, it's not my mission, no? I am here near my house, near the forest, but it's not like this. If I have my garden, for example, to buy the things that I should treat my plants, I can have access to some of these treatments, but to buy the others, I should have now a specific certificate that I have the knowledge to use this product to treat the plants. So all the green treatments are, let's say, to me, accessible. If I need some chemical treatment to do to my plants, then I should go to some courses, to have these courses, and then to obtain this certificate and to buy things. So it is clear that it means climate mission, climate pact, it's only at highest level. No. It goes down to each person. So I know that, why I say about that, because I know I have a garden, I have my potatoes, I have everything. And I know that when I want to buy something, because sometimes we have, let's say, a summer with heavy rains, and my tomatoes go to be sick, to be ill, let's say, a lot of parasites, and I want to solve questions by a stronger treatment, and say, no, it's not possible. You should go by green treatment and to do things, because you should not go to the pollution of the soil and the pollution of the air and so on. So you can see how all these questions are really touchable by each person that we are on European Commission. So obviously it will be preferable that each country around the world respect these rules, because obviously by respecting these pacts, these rules, our let's say agriculture enterprises are, damaged by the concurrence of others, or of others countries, enterprises that are not in the European Union. So they are not obliged to respect this Green Deal, okay? They can use all the treatments that they want, that probably cost less. So, for example, a lot of things it's possible to buy from China, from Egypt, from other North African countries, and they are not obliged to respect these rules. So then it's why no. So people, if I want to buy some orange from Egypt that cost less than orange produced in Italy, so you see, I buy the orange that cost less. So you see, and today in Europe, for those who live in Europe, we can say that we have a lot of now, what's to say, strike now from a demonstration from agriculture workers, because they are really in difficulties, because a lot of rules on to go to Green Deal, but not so much support they feel from European Union. So it needs another education, because if I buy something at kilometer zero, then I contribute by myself to ecological development of my country. No? If I buy the things from the countries that I do not know the prevention, the treatment, I can do a damage from myself to myself, because I don't know if this orange is treated and with which, let's say, the substance is treated. In Italy, for example, in Spain, I know that they are treated by ecological way, or not heavy metals. From other countries, I don't know. I cannot know, because I don't know the rules. And you remember that 10 years ago, it was obliged in European Union to say this product has been made, the origin of this product is European Union. No? So that it's another thing that it's important. And it goes to the engagement, it goes to the social engagement, because we make citizens responsible for their activities, for their actions, let's say, to me. So you see how the personal action can have some effect on the biggest level, or how Breber says, to the macro-societal level, that it's climate emissions, climate problems, cancers, so it is the biggest one. But nevertheless, each of us are small pieces inside, but these small pieces that we are inside, we make the biggest puzzle. Okay, let's go ahead. So if we go to the social innovation, so that they are really connected, because social innovations refers to the innovations that aim to find a solution to well-defined social problem in areas as varied as education, health, economic development. So here, the exercise of citizenship or environmental protections. Here we can see that it's really interconnected. And the concept of social innovation, let's say that if we go to the social innovation, here we can see that there are a lot of theories, a lot of ideas, also in social engagement, as I was telling before. I don't want to go to the theories, because all of us, we are professors and we just know the theories about. So that's, let's say to me that it's in the last 10 years, it was like emphasizations of this concept. So, for example, Peugeot in 2012 confirms that a profusion of individuals and groups who are looking for inventing, building solutions to meet the needs that neither public authorities nor traditional market players seems able to satisfy. Okay. If we speak about this, so this, by this we start to be, like, let's say, to be innovative. We go to some innovation. Now today, we have economists that says we should turn back to our historical way of life, to our past way of life, and then we can speak about new or innovative approach. Okay, how I can go ahead by this? Okay. If we go look here, so social innovation consists on developing new response to new poorly satisfied social needs, obviously under current market and social policy conditions. We should take in mind where we are and which period we are and how we are. And this we should speak about the involvement, the participation, cooperation of the stakeholders concerned, in particular users and end users. When we speak about social innovation and how it is, if I turn back also a little bit to Unicum project, how we are innovative and socially innovative on doing our courses. It's easy to reply. When we do our curricula or new curricula of some courses, we ask to stakeholders, check this curricula. Do you want to add something? Because we take in mind the fact that our experts, our future experts or workers, or our future professionists will work in the city where we are or in the region where we are. So it's important to have stakeholders' involvement also in course design. Obviously, I was telling that this innovation concerns not only the product or service, but also the way it is organized, also the way that it is distributed. And when we speak about also the way cities organized, so in my previous example, we organize the meetings, no? We involve them. We do not involve only the politicians, let's say it's a region or municipality. Today we speak also with the enterprises. Also, when we should host or open our courses to foreign students, there can be someone says, okay, I want a small percentage of foreign students. Why? They say, okay, because they can create concurrential, no? So to my own students. It's another question, but it is on the table. When we speak about how these services are produced in areas of aging, early childhood, housing, health, the fight against poverty, the exclusion, discrimination, and here it's really so the heaviest impact on this field has the social policy of European Union. And you know, the social policy means the policy for migration, the policy for the power, how to say, against the exclusion, against the discrimination, against poverty, making, let's say, or emphasizing the activity for aging people, emphasizing the well-being and childhood, so how the mother should deal also with the children's work and so on. So it's all the things are really interconnected, because how I am telling to my students, if we will have a work, for example, problems, then the people goes home, has the family problems, and it starts to be, let's say, a circle that never interrupts. So we should take care about these two. So that's, and when especially educate children, we should educate them that to be respectful to each others, and then to know, not, it's really difficult by today, but because today we can say that we assist a high level of aggressivity around the world. So that to keep quiet, so to keep calm, and to reflect every time before an actions or before saying the words, if these words are let's say offensive to others. And here we see that it's important to involve, or to be involved in a multi-stage process: emergence, experimentation, dissemination, and evaluation. Because social innovations is a new reply, also in an emergence conditions. We experiment the reply, we disseminate the reply, and we evaluate how we did, the impact of that. So it's important to keep this circle. And once the evaluation in this case is also a really important step on that, because if we do not have evaluation, we can say to each other, oh, we are really good, and keep in mind that we are really good, but for others, we are not really good, so, or probably we are the worst, no? So it's important to be evaluated and to do evaluation in this case. So, because if we are evaluated by constructive way, then when appear another situations, and because this situation like emergency, we can use the knowledge that we obtained, but we have the possibility, thanks to the evaluation, to not make the same errors that we did. So during the experimentations of our new solutions, we keep away ourselves from the errors that we made on period before. So then our dissemination will be, it is the same stage, emergency, experimentation, dissemination, and evaluation, when we evaluate the competencies. So it is the same, because when we speak about the competencies, then it's the same, it's a reply, timely reply to a situations, put in practice our knowledge, keeping in mind the time and the place where we are. So that is also important, to be actual, to be timely, and to be in line with the situation where we are, okay? Then we have the dissemination and evaluation. Obviously, social innovation, if we speak about that, remains a polysemous concept. So that it's a new response to a need, a new solution to a social problem, a change in the way work is organized, a change in the way of public policy are implemented. And here we speak about public policies that should be also a reply to a challenging situation that we live now. So that means, for example, Genoa is the oldest city, if we speak demographically, in the world, okay? So because we have a lot of aged people here, or Liguria at all, it is because we are on seaside, it's because we are between sea and mountain, it's because our cities are, let's say, to me, have all services, and if we check, and then what happens, the policy of the city should be concentrated on aging policy. So centers of relax for the aged people, all the beaches, for example, should be accessible for all. So that is what I discovered. It's interesting that when I have been in Spain, for example, it's another example, there are free beach, okay? And there is a place for people with disability. And the people on the beach are educated to not stop and to not occupy this place. So you can see, if you look in the Spain, it's not the same in French, but in Spain it is. You can see a part of beach is free, though, that people are quite one near others, and one big part free, no people, because they are educated that it's a part of this access to the sea for people with disabilities. So they should keep this for free, to not occupy. So then imagine in other countries that the people are not educated to keep free or to have a respect for the necessities of the people with disability to have the access to this to the sea, if this part will be, or if this segment of beach will be free. No. So you policemen in this case, when the people are not educated in this field, will have a lot of work. No, it's a joke, but it's true. So that you can see how all the things are interconnected and start. We can think about what we want, but if the people are not educated by this or on this field, then we cannot pretend to them. So that is so. I saw in that period that some foreign people says, "Oh, it's free place. I can stop here and I put my things for the beach here." And the other people comes from the beach. Citizen says, "Oh, you cannot. You should keep it for free." So that's so you can see that it's. How the education on this field is important also. So when okay, do you hear me? Because someone deactivated my audio.
It's me mistakenly. Sorry.
So when we speak about the social innovations, you can see that in this box, of social innovation, we can speak of a lot of things. So that's a lot of subjects. And sometimes even when we say, okay, what is this social innovations? We can speak 1 week and probably we will not give to the social innovation a clear concept. Because when we hear or listen to a lot of politicians in the last 3 years, 4 years, probably mostly after COVID, a lot of use of these social innovation, social engagement, and sometimes I say, okay, but about what? No, so that is. So even this social innovation, let's say, and social innovation perspective are supported by heterogeneous theories of political vision. Now, so here we should keep in mind also that this box can be fulfilled with a lot of things, but everything, in my opinion, starts from education, and every, let's say, things or opinion that can be expressed, if we check, it goes to empowerment. Each of us is empowered to be, let's say, responsible, to have to deal with sustainability, to deal with inclusiveness. And also, we should be committed to these points, to this concept. Without that, we cannot speak about neither social engagement, neither social innovation, because we cannot pretend from our governments to do things if we personally do not participate on these things. Why it's so important to speak about social engagement and social innovation? When we speak about social innovation, now today we look how I was telling here, also to the engagement activities. So we check what we have here. We have a lot of ecological points, a lot of ecologically sustainable points, okay? So then, when we speak about the social engagement and social innovation, let's say that it's important also for each citizens, but if I speak about European Commission here, you can see that the European Commission made a proposal on climate, energy, transport and taxation policy to reduce the greenhouse emissions by 55% by 2030. Okay, and the challenge of the European Union is to be or to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. It is also important. But let's have a look to what are the greenhouse emissions by source sector. So here you can see what is, for example, the fuel combustions, industrial process, agriculture, waste management. And here you can see, if we go to waste management, you can check by yourself why also we have a lot of policy on waste management. So here you can see energy industry, manufacturing industry, and household commerce institutions and others that do emissions. So that's it's important, because why it's so important? Now we know, for example, on which level and in which sector should have more impact for that, and when we should work to have these reductions of gas emissions. Look here of greenhouse gas emissions of transport on European Union. What you can see from this graphic, you can see that the road transport is the highest level of pollution. You can see here, the blue one. So, what does mean? That now a lot of projects, a lot of logistical practices to invest on railways transport, because road transport we call in Italia trasporto su gomma. It means car, buses, okay, but in this mostly the car, okay, trucks and so on. So we can see that the gas emissions, its highest level. Never international navigation, you can see it's less than road transport. So all the projects, all the policy now in European Commission, in European Union, sorry, are interested to reduce this blue that we see here. to reduce at the level. Obviously, we cannot pretend to have a drastic reductions, but to start to reduce, okay? And we can see that in 2020, it started to be reduced. If we go, this I took it from a German site. So here you see by inhabitant the carbon dioxide emissions, and here you can see. But look here, nevertheless, European Union has less carbon dioxide emissions per inhabitant than other countries. Okay, here we have some countries. Obviously 643. Some countries inside, like Germany, produce more, some others produce less, and so on. So that it's also important, because also in this case, European Union do a map inside and decide which country should reduce their emissions, their pollution. Why it should work? Or it could work, the reductions or the passing to Green Deal, let's say. One point, it's more jobs. So if we think that green energy created 4 million jobs, then another 4,000, quite 500,000 places will be created in the world that commits for tackling climate change. So that will be at 0.3% more jobs by 2050 than if we do not do nothing. And there are other estimations that if we work, and each country inside the European Commissions will really work on hard, let's say, transformation of green energy, then we can obtain an increase of 1%, and that is a big results. The other point that, or the other reason it's why it could work, it's new fast-growing industry. So renewable energy has grown out, and let's say childhood now, so it's entering in a new phase. So it's a subsidy-free expansion. And today we can say that the cost of solar power has declined of 75% from 2010 to 2018. Wind cost has dropped of 35%. So here, nevertheless, we have some challenges. For example, fossil fuel prices are still low, and the industry is heavily subsidized to the tune of 5 trillions in 2007. Okay, so that's the fossil fuel substitutes impair the cost of competitiveness of renewable energy. Obviously, we should think that we are inside the world, so we cannot say, okay, and for that reason, when I do a change, when I require to my, like Europe, no, if I am Europe and I require some changement, some adjustment to my citizen, but I should, no, defend them from the concurrence, or from the not loyal competitiveness from other countries. Because if not, we will have what is happened now in France, in Germany, that our agriculture workers are on demonstration, not because they do not feel protected. We will have less energy dependency, and we know how it is in the last 2 years, so let's say to me. So then we expect to reduce the European Union dependency only to 20% by 2050, and this will be also a big result of European Union. More competitiveness, so in this case, if we reduce the energy intensity and our energy will reduce, no, the economic, let's say, output, and that will be by 20%. That has been in from 2005 to 2017, so that we have some industry like steel, cement, chemicals, they still need to improve their energy efficiency. And in this case, we have some, let's say, industry, for example, steel industry that create the high cost to maintain this industry, create also or has the impact on at social level, because if these costs are too high to enterprise, and this enterprise says to me, or the owner of the enterprise says to me, okay, I will move to China because there are no so strict ecological rules, then what happens? Our workers lose their workplace. So you can see how hard it is to maintain this process and how hard it is to explain or to empower the people on their decisions. And obviously we should every time think to the competitiveness. The other is empowered consumers. What I started with this. Now that's also, for example, when we speak about empowered consumers, what happened, for example, I can give you the example in Italy, but that by law in winter time, the classes, the workplaces, offices should be heated till 20 degrees, 21, maximum 22, but not less, not more. When we speak in the summertime also, the use of these climatizers are regulated by the law. So now they are regulated. That means we will be educated, and after we do this without regulation, no? It became something, a part of us. So we are the empowered consumers. Other point is decarbonization's lead. The European Union performs the, let's say, like the United States and China went historical efforts to decarbonize our economy. So I was telling to you about the penalty that should pay countries if they have or did not close the miners on carbon, no? For example, in Genoa, we have an industry of carbon, and they gain the permission to use the carbon for when it was winter, hard winter, and we have had not electricity, gas, and so on. So that was only the case when we got the permissions to use the carbon to heat the houses in Genoa, for example. Okay, so that's you need a permission. And climate is a crisis proof. So that's investment in renewable energy has grown substantially over the last 2 decades. And this was less affected by the financial crisis than any other type of investment. So we can see how if we invest on renewable energy, then we can say also for investors that it's a secure, let's say, investment, because no one has lost the money by the investment on this field of economy. I don't know. Okay. I think I finished my presentation because I did in time, yes?
Almost in time, but it was a very interesting
You
presentation
should
as
interrupt
always.
me, you know, because I will speak.
No, I can't, you know. And we have some questions already
Okay.
from participants. Yes, some comments about ecological policy. It's very important for you, Victoria Kocherinen mentioned, because she lived in Germany for a while and felt it, and I agree with her absolutely.
It's on chat?
And we are just yes, you can see. I think that our participants wouldn't mind to spend some minutes more. And we have time for discussions and questions.
I think about the first, the taxes. I think for example, we should do more. For example, in Geneva has been done a lot of researches about the gas emissions of the crosser snails, no, that are in the port. And if they are still with the own motors, so their pollutions, if we have all the Genoa cars on movement, but all, you mean? So that's, and in our port we have 3 or 4 crossers, not so much, so that's it's another. We have what we do not have in Italy, for example, if I produce more energy that I need to sell them, that we have some, still now we have some bureaucratic questions. Because, for example, I can, but also here, be attentive, because now we have these solar panels, okay? But we do not know now, and the engineers are working on that, what we will do with them when they will finish their work. It will be a special waste. So what we do, how we treat this waste, it's another question. So now all engineers are working on that. A lot of engineers.
At the moment, what do you do with crashed piece of panels? How do you utilize them? Because they could be damaged by weather impact or vandals.
I shall to call a special experts on that, and I shall treat this as perilous waste. So the people workers for West came and took this by their procedures.
Yeah, I see the topic of social innovations is a really huge one because it cross-cuts many areas.
Yeah.
And canvases actually any part of human life, basically, when we are talking about that. And indeed, with regard to the social policy issues, this is really one of the most important issues, again, because this is also a part of the economic policy and important area for investments. And this is also the area where Ukraine will become active and is active from a little bit different perspective. But nevertheless, we have this perspective again to be included and carefully managed. So here, this is no simple solution usually proposed, but again, this is about social progress, and that's why the societies deal with that issues very carefully, as well at the level of the European Union. So, dear colleagues, thank you very much for the questions. And that was our final contribution for today.
So I really want to thanks all, to Maria Nesterova that is doing the work, to Oksana Holovko-Gravsha that managed this school. So thanks a lot. And to all the participants that has had the patience to hear all the presentation.
Yes, and for the
On
numerous
Friday, on the
participation.
5th day. Yes,
Yeah.
5th day of the winter school, the last but not the least presentations. It was a great final, a good beginning of this day with Professor Kamil Zaychkovsky, and yeah, this day was really great, and for them, definitely.
Yes, we started today with a broad perspective, because all our ideas of social innovations will be realized in the new framework and is in the new political order we have in the world. And that is to think about that very carefully, how it changes and what this big bird eye perspective, how does it look like? But this bird eye perspective is tremendously important throughout all stages of human being. We talked also with Adam on EU citizenship and social issues. This is essential.
Yes, and that's what we should think every time, that it's a circle, and we are and we are really interconnected.
And
So
that is
we
true.
cannot say it's not my problem. It's happening somewhere. It's
No,
not
the world is still globalized.
Yeah.
Despite, as Kamil said, actually Slovalized nowadays a little bit, but again, the tendency is strong. And I think people actually will learn the lesson from the cooperation, that the cooperation sharpens the world. And that is very, very important lesson to be learned. So thank you very much for all the participants. Maria, how do we proceed with the certificates? That is your part. How do we deal with that further on? Because our participants were promised to receive the certificates for the participation. And stay tuned with us.
Я почекаю презентації від тих спікерів, які будуть вважати за потрібно надати презентацію, як ми це обговорювали. В будь-якому разі будуть завантажені всі записи. Шановні учасники, в телеграм-каналі я про це повідомлю. Також ми дамо ознайомитися ще раз з матеріалами для тих, хто пропустив, і буде оцінювальна форма з невеличким тестом, як ми і казали, в Google класі. Ми на зв'язку, у вас є контакти. З приводу сертифікатів краще писати в телеграм-каналі. Чао, карісіма. Граzie mille. Grazie mille. Ci vediamo.
Ciao.
Amore. Grazie. Отже, сертифікати, окремі сертифікати це будуть на соціальну політику, будуть завантажені, на жаль, хворіє ще Марина, але обов'язково ми дамо на ознайомлення десь приблизно тиждень, тому що там дуже багато матеріалу, там на один кредит, так щоб можна було нормально пройти тест, хоч він не буде, вважаю, ми розуміємо навантаженість, але він буде, щоб це не було профанацією. І десь, я думаю, що на вихідні ми дамо для оцінювальної форми сертифікатів, для отримання сертифікатів і тести на зимову школу. Дуже дякуємо вам, шановні учасники. Чи потрібно нагадати ще в чаті телеграм-каналу, але мені здається, що всі, хто хотів, вже підключився.
Телеграм-канал підключилися. Я нагадаю, що заходьте на веб-сторінки центрів. У нас у Центрі досконалості ми зараз маємо цікавий курс, який читає Адам. Наступного тижня він починається, власне, по європейському економічному праву. Ми плануємо також конференцію у березні. Слідкуйте, стежте, приєднуйтеся за центром в університеті Драгоманова, стежте за Центром досконалості імені Жана Моне, стежте за Українською асоціацією європейського права. Не забувайте, що інтеграція у ваших руках. Ми її робимо кожного дня своєю працею, в тому числі і європейська. І залишайтеся активними. Хай буде мирне небо і слава Україні!
Героям слава. Дивіться, а в мене таке питання.
Пробачте, можна? Дякую. Дуже цікава
Да,
школа.
звичайно. Так.
Дякую. Досить
Героям
цікава
слава.
школа. Я з вами цілий тиждень просто отримувала задоволення, я вам одразу скажу. Тому що правом ЄС я цікавлюся і почути, як кажуть, людей, які дійсно біля цим живуть. Ну, одне ти коли почитаєш, а коли інше це коли тобі практичний досвід розказують. Це різні речі. І я тут почула від своєї колеги, що на наступному тижні буде якась школа. Я просто не запам'ятала. Ви можете або скинути в Телеграм, або сюди написати, щоб можна було приєднатися і на ці всі заходи під'єднатися. Тому що цікаво, реально цікаво, тому що якщо ми будемо вступати в ЄС, ну просто потрібно розуміти, як це все відбувається, а не тільки, як кажуть, або від цукерки показали гарну цукерку зовні, а що внутрі, це буде сюрприз, який ми побачимо, коли будемо членами ЄС. Я розумію, що це добре все, але ми повинні знати, до чого нам готуватися і що нас очікує, чому ми туди йдемо і що нас буде чекати там. Можете під'єднати нас, або кинути сюди посилання, або у групу Телеграму, в цю школу, що ви сказали, там конференція, яка буде. Можете все зробити, або кудись.
Я зараз спробую це поставити на джемборді. Я не знаю, чому я не можу, до речі.
Чому не можеш? Там всі можуть, до джемборду можуть підключитися. Дивіться, шановні учасники, будь ласка, я скинула зараз посилання на телеграм-канал, де ми всі, от те, що в нас проводяться по проєктам, обов'язково ми тоді викладаємо інформацію. І по темі європейських студій, в нас там є активна спільнота, там, які діляться інформацією, так, щоб вас не підключати до чату координаторів Жана Моне, бо там тільки, власне, щоб своє підключення. Ми все, що дотично до європейських студій, ми туди анонсуємо, кажемо. Те, що сказала пані Оксана, слідкуйте, будь ласка, скинула вона це в УРЧИС, це Західноукраїнський центр, дослідницький центр європейських студій. Наш центр досконалості Жана Моне, тобто в нас ця зимова школа, це переважно заслуга пані Оксани і команди таких правників, міжнародників. Але будуть ми робимо це в контексті впровадження проєкту Центру досконалості. ЕСІ, Європейські студії соціальних інновацій в освіті, ви можете побачити оце лого. І на сайті ЕСІ, центр, chesi.eu, в нас теж є інформація, будуть ці матеріали, анонсуємо. Я казала, що в рамках ЕСІ в нас буде ще конференція по екологічним, разом з Сумським національним аграрним. От зараз навіть була така правнича тема, це одне з найкращих фахівців, це була львівська команда пані Оксани, і виступав Роман Петров, я вам раджу також послухати запис, це Києво-Могилянська академія. А от по екологічній політиці, по Green Deal, одне з найкращих – це наші сумчани. І буде дуже цікаво, там буде про відновлення, про екологічні, саме оці от є і вимоги, і виклики, і перспективи подолання, те, що є, тобто якщо є. А потім ми будемо робити літню не знаю, ми з'ясуємо, чи можемо ми робити літню, бо зараз є певні обмеження. Але буде обов'язково осіння школа, де ми будемо також продовжувати цю тему інтеграції європейських студій, от саме в social issues, от соціальні інновації, актуальні теми по згуртованості, таке вже буде наше більше. Угу. Так що ми запрошуємо, будь ласка, да, от вже сайт наш, скинула пані Оксана сайт їх центру, там завжди є анонси. Борщик з домогазяйками вдався. Дякую дуже, Марія. Дякую. Це було складно господиням, там кожна знає, як в неї що, але я намагалася не заважати, а ми тут поділилися. Отже, всі матеріали, всі записи точно вони вже завантажуються. Будь ласка, знаю по собі, що складно переглядати там їх, але будемо намагатися, може, за допомогою ШИІ, ми будемо такі короткі анонси, скріншоти, щоб вам було легше і тести, щоб щось запам'яталося. Дякую дуже.
А можна запитати?
Да, кажіть ще питання. Да.
Ну, в першу чергу хочу подякувати вам за таку плідну працю. Це дуже корисна інформація. Я як студентка з Національного авіаційного університету, мені було дуже цікаво, дякую вам ще раз. А запитання в мене ось таке. Як можна приєднатись до Google класу вашого для того, щоб пройти
Так,
екзамен?
в чаті. Classroom – це зимова школа, а там є, між іншим, в стрічці є і по соціальній політиці. От Classroom, Google.com, подивіться, будь ласка, трішечки от. Дедлайн будемо ми все ж таки робити, тому що мучають Андрія Борисовича, там хтось згадує влітку, а ми у вас взимку були, дайте, будь ласка, сертифікат. Буде дедлайн гуманний, ну, це вже до Андрія Борисовича, якщо якісь індивідуальні обставини, ми завжди йдемо на зустріч і розуміємо, що вже починається семестр, вже складно, у всіх навантаження, війна, так що подивимось.
Я змінив налаштування, тобто у нас дедлайн буде останній день місяця.
Останній день місяця, так
Да.
пізно.
В цьому році на один день більше.
Так.
Це точно.
Шановні учасники, чи хоче хтось не технічні, а такі в мене, можливо, у вас є якісь там ще побажання, пишіть ще. Андрій, скинь, будь ласка, Джем. Да.
А підкажіть, будь ласка, а коли ви розмістите тест в Google класі?
Дамо декілька днів для того, щоб завантажити презентації. От я, наприклад, вчора не встигла, ті, що мені пані Оксана надіслала, я от зараз їх тільки буду розміщати. Так, щоб скільки, Оксана, скільки там хтось ще буде давати презентації?
Я перепитаю колег, бо це початок семестру, і всі трошки починають бути дуже-дуже забігані. Тому я ще уточню, вчора обіцяв Василь Анатолійович, то я ще йому нагадаю, і Оксана Анатоліївна, то ми тоді спробуємо надіслати до кінця наступного тижня, напевно.
Ну, ми зазвичай робимо. Да, ми зазвичай робимо Google клас, ми його не закриваємо. У мене тільки буде дуже велике прохання, щоб ви з нього не видалялися, бо ми звітуємо, я не хочу його з одного боку архівувати, щоб був там спокійний доступ до документів, а з іншого боку, ну, якщо можна, хай він на вас трішечки ще повісить. Розумію, що багато всіх цих Google класів, але от теж я буду писати в стрічці учасникам, щоб таке прохання, щоб ми ж нещодавно давали звіти, там, я пам'ятаю точно, що було більше, а потім люди закривають, виходять, а ми звітуємо по Google класам також.
Ще невеличке питаннячко можна? Після проходження тесту ми пишемо до групи в Telegram та отримуємо сертифікат, так?
Угу.
Ага. Так, а писати просто в групу чи комусь конкретному?
Щодо сертифікатів, то до мене. Google форма, вона і формує сертифікат, якщо ви відповіли правильно на запитання тесту. Вам автоматично, якщо ви пройшли тест, приходить на вашу пошту ваш сертифікат з вашим унікальним номером. Він у нас залишається в системі, ми його подаємо в свої звіти.
Я зрозуміла, дякую.
Дякую вам, шановні.
То що, дякуємо учасникам для читання. На джемборді я оголошення про події, які будуть в нас в Центрі досконалості, поставила. Долучайтеся, стежте в соціальних медіа, і я насправді дуже дякую учасникам, тому що ваша активна участь зробила цей курс і цю зимову школу такою, яка вона є. Дуже-дуже дякую. Гарного всім вечора.
Дякую, Оксана, дякую ще раз учасники, дякую Андрію. Дякую, ми це зробили. Це найголовніше. Все, миру та наснаги всім нам. Все.